thank you for coming. My name is Jason King. I work for Dover Coal and Partners. Working for Dover Coal, I've had the opportunity to go around the world and to basically work on new projects in new towns. And I learned just basically, going to these places and watching them grow, that the people in the towns are actually the most interesting part. And in the new urbanism, it's quite often the case that we talk a lot about the architecture and the planning. And in recent years, we talk a lot about the financing. But when you actually, after several years, get to follow the lives of people, you begin to see how the new urbanism really affects and makes for a better kind of life. So possibly Newtown St. Jerome is the first novel of the new urbanism, although it's debated. I'm always worried Jim Kunstler is going to come and throw a chair at me. But he wrote The Witch of Hebron and A World Made by Hand, and those are great books. But they are kind of apocalyptic, and they do happen in the far-off future. And I'm not sure the Charter of the New Urbanism says a lot about witches in particular, whereas this is really just kind of like I did my best to capture the practice of the new urbanism as it is for a lot of people right now. And behind me, I just put up some new construction to give you some visuals for when this gets slow. Let me just read really quick a plot synopsis, just a paragraph to give you an idea about how the book goes. The book is for sale in the other room and online. And then after a quick synopsis, I'll read a chapter, tiny section from the book. So, Leo Dana, a New York architect of international repute, whose practice is vanishing after the housing market collapse, moves to the U.S.-Mexico border east of El Paso, Texas, to revive the Newtown St. Jerome initiative. It's in the borderlands between El Paso and Juarez. I lived in that area for 2 years. We worked on Plan El Paso, the comprehensive plan for the region. I went back and forth between Juarez and El Paso, and at that time, Juarez was the most dangerous city in the world, including Kabul. I mean, it was just crazy. And abductions and kidnappings was a major industry. But nonetheless, it's Texas, and they're building fast. And outside of Juarez, the outskirt neighborhoods are very large. And the new urbanism is there because they're building new towns, maquiladora towns. Maquiladoras are the factories. And they look like medieval towns. There's factories at the center. There are literally walls around. The security keeps the workers safe, but it creates these bizarre kind of fiefdoms for people that live in El Paso, up in the sunny hills of El Paso. They drive in every day, and they're kind of lords over this system. It's a system that produces all of our stuff, that doesn't come from China, comes from Mexico, just about. And so it's a system that we are dependent on, but it creates this kind of strange kind of life. So Newtown St. Jerome is kind of like the illicit child of El Paso and of Juarez, of the United States and of Mexico, and people are going back and forth, and people still go back and forth. And so let's read a little bit. June opens the back door in the kitchen to the midday light and the sound of the wind through the upper boughs of the desert date palms. She picks out the kitchen fruit bowl, a Mexican canastel. After months of emotional distancing between her and her husband, the curt hellos, the silent meals, Adrian's drinking and his sleeping on the couch, it surprises June how much the actual loss of his physical presence has affected her. Even when they were avoiding each other, she would at least hear him in the next room, and she no longer does. Founding the town has had the exact opposite effect on her marriage, on her whole life, that she expected. She knows that in Spanish there is a word for exactly this kind of decision, but she can't remember what it is. June takes a first spoonful of the canastel and realizes that both halves are too much for her to eat alone. She doubts that the fruit will keep her now that it's been cut open, and irritated by the waste caused by her husband Adrian's departure, June goes out the back door with a broom. She unties the rope, holding the door to the horse pen closed, opens the aluminum gate, and chases her husband Adrian's 2 fillies out of the pen with a broom. She'll be damned if she's going to listen to them whinny and nigh anymore. They'll find Adrian wherever he is, and he can feed them. She returns to the kitchen. She walks past the fruit bowl and past her desk with its 2 piles of unopened bills and lays on the couch with a Zane Grey novel. Her 3 little Chihuahua dogs yap to be lifted onto her chest. She lifts Whitey and pets his thick white fur. Ain't supposed to be like this, Whitey, she says. Maybe there would be enough money if we sold it all. The dog starts to howl at something out the window. He jumps up and puts his front paws on the sill, and he starts to growl. June lifts her head and sees a pudgy boy straddling a bicycle in the street. He wears a white t-shirt with black streaks of mud. The boy wipes tears from his eyes. June gets up and walks to the front porch. She opens the door to the graveyard stillness and languid shadows of her empty town, and the boy asks, "Algo, por favor?" "Yes," June says, bending down and beckoning him to the porch. He's no more than 12 years old, and on his knee is a bloody cut covered in mud. A single red droplet at the front of a lengthening red trail makes its way to the boy's sock. The boy pushes his bike up to the porch and carries it up the wooden stairs and into the shade of the overhang. He looks up at June and says gracias, but continues to whimper at the scraped knee. "It's just a little road rash. We'll fix you up," says June. "Gracias." June opens the front door and holds it for the boy, and he brings the rusty black BMX bike into the house instead of leaving it on the porch. June smiles at this and wishes that there could be even a single child who lived in the whole town of St. Jerome who could possibly threaten to steal the bike, as she assumes the boy must fear. The boy sets the bike up against the wall and he walks through the kitchen, oblivious to the barking little dogs underfoot. June closes the door and follows behind the boy to the kitchen when she hears the whoop whoop of a patrol car out front. "I'll be right there," she says to the boy as he sits at the table. He stares at her with a look of alarm. His tiny eyes above his fat cheeks widen. June assumes he's in some kind of trouble like small boys are apt to find. There must be some connection between the two visitors because they're never visitors. June looks out the window and sees the white and green sport utility vehicle of the Border Patrol. "Oh my God," she says. She hears the boy run out the back door. "Oh my God," she says again. June takes a deep breath and walks to the front door. She opens it as the two Hispanic bordermen with shiny stars pinned to the green polyester shirts that are tight around their biceps tip their hats to her. They say they are looking for a fat man on a bike who just crossed the border from Mexico. June's mind cycles between two thoughts. First, that the boy should be with his parents, and these men could reunite them. And second, the boy must have known what he was doing to cross the border. Though it is only a few miles away, there must have been a strong inducement. The boy's own parents likely encouraged him. All June has to say is no. She has not seen a man on a bike, which is true enough, and thank them before they leave. She calls to them, to the officers, as they turn around, and she asks them other questions, so many other questions. She buys the boy time. Hopefully he's smart enough to hide and not run. Hopefully he's still in the house when the men leave, and she can contact the boy's parents. But the boy is gone, and June will never see him again. "We have a home, Whitey," she says, holding the little dog to her chest as she lays on the couch. "This is our home, Whitey, and we will not lose it." She cries in fits of fear and concern for the little boy. For the remainder of her short life, June will look to the desert horizon 1,000 times for the speck of the boy's presence and never see it. "We'll call Leo. We'll call the architect," she says. "He'll know what to do." Thank you. Okay, so I've never done a book reading, so I don't know what happens next. Are there any questions?
How long did it take you to write?
It took 2.5 years. I basically woke up every morning, wrote from 5:30 to 7, and ran, and then worked at Dover Cohen Partners 60 hours a week. You know, flying. We went to Tbilisi, the Republic of Georgia. We built a new town out there. I got to draw 3 in Florida. We were working on a couple random ones in Texas, so it was really busy. What I learned is that if you just, and I had a child 14 weeks ago. So Kadi always talks about how busy we've all been in the last year. I really think if you really mean to write a book, and if you really do want to, you can find the time.
So you wrote every day?
I pretty much wrote every day, yeah. I think 6 days a week, typically. Yep. Okay, well, that's, yep.
Did you get distracted thinking about your characters while you go to work?
Can you repeat the question in your answer?
Sure,
Because I
yep.
don't have anybody in mind.
Did I get distracted thinking about the characters while I worked? Yeah, it's funny, because when you're writing, you know, I do a lot of public meetings, and so there's a lot of time to just think. And it was funny, sometimes I could find myself presenting and my mind would actually be thinking about what I was going to write. It really becomes the thing you're the most passionate about. I really think the highest state of human existence is a passionate one. And when you write, it really just takes over everything. And there's a lot of, like, this, you read this and there's New Urbanists, I didn't base it on any New Urbanists, but there's pieces of personality traits you recognize. and I got to interact with them. So there's guys my characters are based on who I would work with, and so kind of at times I was living it, so kind of interesting.
I mean, what was the evolution of the story? Because I've been lucky enough to know that you've been writing this for a while, back while you were still writing and being very quiet about it. I've heard you describe it a couple of different ways. So kind of, what was the seed and how did it evolve into this? Did you always intend it to be a novel of the New Urbanism, or did that just happen out of the work?
Yeah. Did I intend it to be a novel of New Urbanism? No, I just wrote about what I care about, and I think we all care about this. I was in El Paso, Texas, and we're doing the comprehensive plan, and we're talking about walkable, livable communities, and the violence is unbelievable. People are escaping. There are awful things you see. Not in El Paso. El Paso is a very safe city, but there are awful wounds. There are terrible stories, kidnapping, murders, and we're talking about community and front porches and neighbors knowing each other, and they're talking about 10-foot walls with barbed wire and helicopter pads so they can get away, and you're just wondering, does the New Urbanism make any sense in this place? So, so that question, are we just doing this in El Paso, Texas because we'll go anywhere they'll pay us and we're just mercenaries? Or does this concept really make sense everywhere and at all places and at all times? In 2.5 years of living there and getting to know people and building stuff with people and spending time in Juarez and seeing these factory towns and getting to know those people, I really came back from it all like this, that world reaffirms what we do. You live and die by your community connections, literally in that case. And I come back, even more of a zealot than I was.
So
and,
this, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
So this is based sort of on a greenfield T&D model, not like infill or transit-oriented development. Why did you pick like a greenfield T&D as the setting?
Yeah, so why pick a greenfield T&D? Well, the next gen people always get angry. They're always like, that's so the last generation. We're about infill. We're about revitalizing cities. The reality is that what happens is you start with a T&D, it's up affluent community, but it's kind of far out from El Paso, but then it starts to have connections with El Paso, and then across the border within sight of it is one of these factory towns. It's a standalone greenfield site, and then it starts to have connections with the city. And what happens is that the characters go back and forth around all of them. And the problems with the T&D, I'm honest about that in the book. And then characters find their way into the cities, and the cities become more important. So we start off with this, but you find yourself in Juarez, you find yourself in El Paso proper, and the cities are a big part of the book as well.
Can I ask a follow-up? Do you talk about the issues, the broader issues of the New Urbanism in it, including infill and transit, all that stuff? Do the characters get involved in all those thoughts?
Yeah, so do I talk about the broader issues of the New Urbanism? Yes, he's got developers he has to convince that don't understand how they can possibly sell this model. It's a greenfield T&D way out in the east, and the city doesn't want to supply services. He's working with contractors who are awful, and the back and forth battle between them is a big part of the book. What else do we have to deal with every day?
Codes,
exactly. They've got to go way out east in order to escape the city's own codes. Transportation. Well, Leo Dana finds that the town, and it does start to take off and it does start to do well, but he finds that it lives and dies, as great a place as it is, by the same laws of real estate as anything else. And so something happens that essentially what he never would have hoped for, but involving big roads. Well, basically, no, we'll just leave it at this. A big road comes out to him and it helps save the town. And so transit, yeah, it's all a factor. Now here's the thing about the New Urbanism, really quick, is that we rushed, my wife and I, she's the publisher, we rushed to get this out as fast as we could for the CNU because I'm talking to agents and I'm talking to publishers, and they want to cut a lot of the New Urbanism out of it. They're like, we really like the story, we really like the characters, it's wonderful, it's in El Paso, people are thinking about the border, but when it gets and I think it will, when it gets published by a major publisher, it's going to be very different. So this is like the director's cut.
unabridged version.
This is the unabridged version, yeah. Yep.
So I'm intrigued
Right.
Because you have a message, and you could have chosen a nonfiction vehicle. What I'm wondering is that, do you see a way to partner the cut version? Well, first of all, how did you decide that you wanted to do this in a novel
Right.
as opposed to nonfiction? And then do you see possibilities as your novel gets out into the world of being able to tell the backstory and get your other message through?
Yeah, so the first question is why a novel, and the second question, just summarized, is this going to help in the world, the greater mission, my day job? I did a novel because, we're actually, Dover Cole, we're working on other books, nonfiction books. And those are coming out. The reality is I was only going to get up at 5:30 in the morning to do something I really loved doing, art, and fiction is art, It kind of like you start from a certain place and it grows like a tree and you don't know where it's going to go. And the characters are kind of like strangers to you at first, and then they become real friends. And it just, it had to be art. I think you can say more things with fiction than you can say with nonfiction. And is it going to help the day job? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if this is a good career move. I mean, I don't know what happens. I don't know what my clients are going to think. I just had to do it. And it was really fun.
Well, I was also interested in your comment about having the no-realism piece being cut out.
Right.
And that you clearly wanted it in.
Now, there's a lot of details. There's a lot of details about the new urbanism in this that we're going to think fascinating, about setbacks and codes and the specific mechanisms of finance and road widths and spatial enclosure. Leo Dana is the architect, and he's a planning geek, and he thinks the whole world should be interested in this. So, probably, the average person won't be as interested as all of you will be. There's a good chance that when it gets cut, it might be a book that my father might read and like. I still think the characters are strong enough. I think the founding of towns on the American frontier, even if it's a book half or three-quarters that size, it still resonates with people. And I think, and the new urbanism is going to still appear in it. I think it's still going to be good, even if it gets cut. All right, so with that, let's end it. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Katia, for organizing this.